Are you ready? Imagine a winter so silent and unforgiving that even the snow seems to hold its breath. I thought I would face it alone, until something or someone appeared outside my cabin, lying in the storm. A presence that should not exist and would not survive if left untouched. I let an alien stay with me this winter, and the story he told about watching Jesus left me shaken. For months, I lived alongside him, witnessing truths about humanity, compassion, and the choices we make when no one is watching. This is not a tale of miracles, but of observation, judgment, and the quiet power of integrity. If you're listening from anywhere in the world, share this story, subscribe to the channel, and hit notifications to uncover what Jesus' life revealed through the eyes of the observers. Step inside the cabin, into the heart of the storm, and discover what was recorded, what was revealed, and why the winter left me forever changed. Jordan believed winter was a season meant to be endured alone. Not heroically, not tragically, but quietly, like something passing through a body that no longer resisted. He lived where the road ended and the signal disappeared, in a small cabin pressed into the tree line, far enough from the nearest town that the world rarely intruded. Days followed a pattern shaped by habit rather than hope. He woke before sunrise, fed the stove, drank black coffee, and watched light creep slowly across frozen ground. The silence was not empty. It was structured, predictable, almost comforting in its refusal to ask anything of him. Jordan had not always lived this way. Once, winters were interruptions, something shared, something complained about, and waited through together. Over time, those shared winters receded into memory, replaced by a preference for distance that hardened into permanence. He told himself, this was not loneliness, it was clarity. Fewer voices meant fewer distortions. Fewer expectations meant fewer disappointments. Out here, nothing pretended to be more than it was. The cabin reflected that philosophy. Everything had a function. Nothing was decorative. Shelves held tools, dried food, books read slowly and often. A calendar hung on the wall, though days rarely needed marking. The weather decided the schedule. Snow determined effort. Darkness set boundaries. Jordan adjusted without complaint, as though his life had been gradually narrowing toward this exact arrangement. Winter arrived early that year. Snow settled heavily and stayed. The forest seemed to close inward, muffling sound, swallowing distance. Jordan noticed how quickly the outside world vanished beneath white, how easily paths erased themselves. It felt intentional, almost deliberate, as if the landscape were practicing disappearance. He did not find this unsettling. If anything, it confirmed what he already believed. The world was learning how to be quiet again. Jordan assumed the coming months would pass unchanged. He would split wood, clear drifts, read by firelight, and wait for thaw without marking the wait. Nothing unexpected survived winters like this. Nothing uninvited endured the cold. Whatever stories existed beyond the trees belonged to other places, other lives. This winter, like the ones before it, was meant to be faced alone, or so he believed. What Jordan did not consider was that silence sometimes watches back, and that solitude can become an invitation rather than a shield, once something unseen decides to cross the distance itself slowly. The storm arrived without ceremony, thick snow falling straight down as if weight mattered more than wind. Jordan noticed the change before night fully settled. The way the forest grew muted, the air dense and expectant. By dusk, visibility collapsed to only a few meters, the world shrinking into a narrow circle of gray and white. He secured the cabin, fed the stove, and prepared for the long night, assuming the storm would pass like others before it. Sometime before midnight, a sound interrupted the silence. Not a crash or a call, but a subtle inconsistency, a wrongness Jordan felt more than heard. He waited, listening letting the noise resolve itself. It did not. Against reason, he pulled on his coat and boots and stepped outside. The cold biting immediately through layered fabric. Snow pressed deep, swallowing each step as he moved slowly beyond the cabin's outline. That was when he saw it. A shape resting where nothing should have been resting. Too symmetrical to be fallen wood. Too still to be animal. Snow clung to its edges, already claiming it, softening lines that should not have existed at all. Jordan stopped, breath visible, heart steady, but alert. He did not feel fear. He felt recognition without understanding. The shape did not move. There were no tracks leading to it, no signs of arrival or departure. No light marked the sky. No sound followed. It was simply there, placed into the storm like an unanswered question. Jordan approached cautiously, each step an effort, until the details resolved enough to confirm what his mind resisted. This was not human. It was not anything he could name. The cold was ruthless. Jordan understood that immediately. Whatever lay before him had been exposed too long. The storm did not discriminate. Flesh, metal, intention. None of it mattered once the temperature dropped low enough. He knelt, brushed away snow, and saw a surface unlike skin, dull and unfamiliar, unmoving beneath his touch. The realization arrived quietly. If it remained where it was, it would not last the night. No rescue would come. No explanation would intervene. The storm had sealed the moment into simplicity. Either it stayed, or it ended. Jordan remained still, the snow continuing to fall, as the forest watched without judgment, and the cold waited patiently for the decision to be made before darkness fully claimed everything around them. Jordan did not pause to question what the shape meant. The cold had a way of stripping moments down to necessity, and necessity does not debate. He felt the delay stretching like thin ice, dangerous the longer weight rested on it. Thought would invite hesitation. Hesitation would invite failure. So he moved, guided by a reflex older than explanation. He tested the weight with careful pressure, surprised by how little resistance there was. Whatever lay beneath the snow was lighter than it appeared, as if mass had been borrowed rather than owned. Jordan adjusted his stance, anchored himself against the slope, and committed to the effort. Snow resisted every motion, dragging at boots and breath alike, but motion itself became the decision. Each step erased the question of why. There was no surge of panic, no cinematic clarity. Only the quiet certainty that leaving it there would be a choice he would carry long after winter loosened its grip. Jordan had lived long enough to understand that some moments define a person precisely because they pass without witnesses. This was one of those moments. The forest offered no approval. The storm offered no urgency beyond the cold present. As he worked, Jordan avoided assigning names. He did not allow the word alien to take shape. He did not consider stories or consequences or how absurd the situation might sound if spoken aloud. Labels would only slow his hands. He focused instead on balance, leverage, breath, and direction. These were problems he knew how to solve. The shape remained unresponsive, its stillness neither resisting nor inviting help. That absence of reaction unsettled him more than struggle would have. It felt like carrying something that had already accepted an ending. Jordan refused to participate in that acceptance. The effort burned through his arms and back, a deep ache that sharpened his awareness rather than dulling it. By the time the cabin came back into view, the storm had intensified. Snow thickened the air, blurring edges and distance. Jordan understood that once inside, there would be no return to ignorance. Whatever he brought across that threshold would alter the winter he thought he knew. Yet the threshold was crossed without ceremony. He closed the door behind him and sealed the cold out. The decision had been made long before belief could argue otherwise. Some choices do not wait for understanding. Jordan laid the shape near the stove, careful not to place it too close to the heat. Warmth returned slowly to the cabin, contrasting sharply with the frozen silence outside. He removed snow packed against unfamiliar limbs and observed details with deliberate calm. The form was humanoid but misaligned with expectation. Limbs extended slightly too long, joints bent at unfamiliar angles. Skin carried a muted gray-blue tone, neither reflective nor absorbent, textured like living material designed for resilience. There was damage. A darkened wound spread across the upper torso, edges uneven, tissue hardened as if burned by something far beyond ordinary fire. Jordan understood injury. He had treated animals, hikers, himself. Pain had patterns. Survival had rules. This injury broke them. Still, the body remained warm beneath the surface, subtle movement indicating life continued despite failing conditions. He worked methodically, gloves removed, tools chosen by habit rather than knowledge. Warm water loosened frozen residue. Clean cloth cleared away debris. The wound did not bleed. It reacted differently, tightening rather than opening, as though responding intelligently to care. Jordan noted this without interpretation. Observation first, meaning later. The face held no expression he could read. Features were symmetrical, but unfamiliar. Eyes closed, breathing shallow and slow. There was no sound of distress, no reflexive motion. It felt wrong, yet not dead. The presence carried weight, not physically, but in a way Jordan struggled to articulate, like standing near something that noticed him even while unconscious. He covered the body with blankets and adjusted the room's heat gradually. Shock was as dangerous as cold. He remembered that much. Outside, the storm continued without interruption, sealing the cabin from the rest of the world. Inside, something irreversible had already occurred. Jordan sat nearby and waited, not out of fear, not curiosity, but responsibility. Whatever this was, it had been brought inside by choice. He would not abandon it to chance now. The cabin felt smaller, altered by an unseen gravity. Silence pressed differently, as if no longer empty. The winter Jordan expected was already gone. Something unexplainable now shared his shelter, breathing quietly, alive in a way that demanded patience rather than answers. He sensed that understanding would come slowly, measured not in explanations, but in endurance, attention, and the quiet recognition that some truths arrive only after survival has been secured, and winter finishes, revealing what it kept hiding. Silence settled into the cabin as if it had always belonged there. The storm loosened its grip outside, but the quiet inside grew denser, layered with presence rather than absence. Mornings arrived pale and cold. Firewood cracked. Water warmed. Time moved forward without comment. The being remained near the stove, eyes often open, unblinking for long stretches. It did not speak. It did not gesture, yet attention radiated from it, steady and unwavering. Every movement was tracked. When boots were set by the door, when hands lingered over the kettle, when Jordan paused before opening a book, nothing escaped notice. Routine continued because routine was familiar. Meals were prepared and eaten in the same order. Snow was cleared from the threshold. Tools were returned to their places. The cabin revealed itself through repetition, and repetition revealed the man living within it. The observer absorbed these patterns without interruption, as though cataloging rhythm itself. There was no sense of threat, no demand. The silence felt deliberate, restrained. At times it pressed gently, inviting awareness rather than response. Jordan found himself moving more carefully, not out of fear, but because presence sharpens behavior. Choices that once passed unnoticed now carried weight simply by being seen. Nights stretched long. Firelight cast uneven shadows across walls that had known only one occupant for years. Breathing could be heard from the corner of the room, slow and measured, never faltering. The sound anchored the space, transforming solitude into something shared, though still wordless. Observation flowed both ways. The being watched, but it was also watched in return. Subtle shifts occurred, slight adjustments in posture, a change in breathing rhythm when storms intensified, signals without language, exchanged in stillness. Meaning hovered nearby but refused to settle. Days passed without count. Snow rose and fell. The cabin held its secret. Silence did not break. It deepened. And within that depth, something unseen was being measured. Not in words or actions, but in consistency. In who someone remained when nothing demanded performance and no explanation was required. Whatever was happening was patient. It did not rush revelation. It allowed winter to speak first, allowed habit to expose truth. In that waiting, Jordan sensed something ancient at work, something that believed answers mattered less than patterns, and that time itself was the most honest witness available. Even now, that silence continued watching long after footsteps faded away. It happened without warning, without sound, without any visible change in the room. The fire burned, as it always had. Snow rested against the windows. Yet a thought arrived that Jordan did not generate. It was not heard. It was known. The realization stopped him mid-motion, not with fear, but with clarity sharp enough to demand attention. The thought carried no language at first. It arrived as weight and direction, a sense of acknowledgement flowing outward from the still figure by the stove. Gratitude was the closest word Jordan could later assign to it, though the feeling itself was broader, layered with surprise and something resembling relief. It was not an emotional exchange as humans understand emotion. It was recognition, precise and intentional. Jordan did not answer because there was nothing to answer with. His mind searched for edges, for explanation, and found none. The thought did not press further. It waited, present but restrained, as if aware that crossing too quickly would fracture something fragile. In that pause, understanding formed slowly. Communication had begun, not through sound, but through alignment. Another impression followed, clearer this time. The being had not expected intervention. Probability had not favored survival. Compassion, especially uncalculated compassion, had not been anticipated. The acknowledgement carried no praise. It felt observational, as though an unexpected variable had entered a long equation. The cabin seemed altered by that admission. Silence no longer belonged solely to the room. It now contained intention. Jordan became aware that attention was not merely being paid, but returned. Observation was mutual. He was not alone with something unconscious. He was sharing space with awareness that had been measuring long before revealing itself. The connection faded as gently as it arrived. No instructions followed. No explanations were offered. Only the residual sense that something fundamental had shifted. Jordan understood that the quiet weeks before had not been preparation by chance. They had been calibration. That night passed differently. Sleep came late, not from fear, but from recognition. Whatever the being was, later known as Elion, it had crossed a boundary rarely crossed without consequence. It had spoken without speaking. And, in doing so, it revealed the first truth of the winter. The story unfolding was not about rescue. It was about expectation, and how easily expectation could be undone. By winter's end, observation would transform into testimony neither expected nor reversible. Observation, Jordan realized, was older than the storm. The thought arrived with a subtle weight, a presence that did not rely on words or gesture. The cabin remained quiet. But the air shifted, as though a layer of reality had been peeled back and something unseen had been watching all along. The storm that had brought the figure to his doorstep was neither accident nor interruption. It was timing, precise and deliberate. Elion's awareness was everywhere without being invasive. Jordan understood, not through sight or sound, but through the undeniable sense that every motion he had made over the previous weeks, every measured action, every pause, every small kindness, had been noted. Nothing trivial, nothing overlooked. And it was not curiosity alone that lingered over those moments. There was calculation, assessment, a patient weighing of possibility against consequence. The injury, he realized next, had not been intended as test or cruelty. It had simply created a moment in which observation could shift from passive to active. The location of the fall was measured, chosen, a convergence of risk and proximity. Jordan's hands had moved before thought. His choices had been simple, logical, compassionate, and that simplicity had mattered more than any dramatic intervention could have. Elion did not speak. The sense of purpose flowed into Jordan, like the quiet logic of gravity. Everything he had assumed about chance, about isolation, about winter itself, was being reconsidered in the presence of intelligence that required no words. The storm, the snow, the injury, they were markers, coordinates in an experiment he had unknowingly entered. The realization pressed against him slowly, like ice creeping across a window. Observation was neither benign nor punitive. It was careful, deliberate, patient, and unseen. Every decision he had made, from feeding the fire to moving the fallen shape, had been part of a larger assessment that he could not fully perceive. Awareness without intrusion, calculation without threat. By the time the snow thickened against the cabin walls again, Jordan understood that the winter he thought he had prepared for alone had already begun in the mind of another. He had not been chosen at random. He had been visible to eyes that did not blink, that did not rest. The storm had delivered him not only a presence to care for, but a truth that reshaped the silence around him. Everything in the coming weeks, every wordless observation, every small act of survival and kindness, would be measured against this unspoken metric, and the winter itself had become a quiet stage for something far older and far more deliberate than snow or solitude. Interest was the wrong assumption. What surrounded Jordan was not fascination, nor wonder, nor the casual attention of something discovering novelty. Observation, as Elion conveyed it, functioned like a system, structured and continuous, unfolding across time rather than moments. It did not search for excitement. It searched for patterns. The realization settled slowly. Jordan sensed that what was happening in the cabin was only a fragment of something far larger. Observation did not begin with him, nor would it end with him. It moved quietly through generations, through cities and deserts, through conflict and cooperation alike. Humanity was not singled out because it was special, but because it had reached a point where its choices carried consequences beyond itself. Elion's presence clarified something Jordan had never considered. Watching was not passive. It required patience, restraint, and rules. Observers did not interfere easily, because interference corrupted data. What mattered was how humans behaved when they believed they were unseen, when fear, convenience, and compassion competed without witnesses. Jordan understood that decisions were being prepared, not made. Observation fed deliberation. Deliberation would one day become action or restraint. The process was slow by design, allowing contradiction to exist without collapse. Compassion and cruelty were both recorded. Progress and destruction carried equal weight. Nothing was dismissed as anomaly. The cabin, small and isolated, had become a lens. Not because it was unique, but because it was simple. In simplicity, patterns emerged cleanly. A single human, removed from social reward and punishment, revealed truths that crowds obscured. That was why the winter mattered. Time under pressure stripped performance away. Jordan felt no accusation in this knowledge, only gravity. Humanity was being measured against itself, not against some alien ideal. Observation asked a single question repeated endlessly. What do you choose when nothing forces you to choose well? Silence returned after the understanding settled. Outside, snow continued its steady work. Inside, Jordan accepted that the eyes watching humanity were not searching for heroes or villains. They were waiting to see which pattern would endure long enough to justify trust. That waiting stretched across centuries, unnoticed by those being measured, patient beyond emotion. It did not hurry judgment. It allowed failure, repetition, recovery. Jordan sensed that observation itself was mercy, because it delayed final decisions long enough for change to remain possible, even fragile, even uncertain. Within a narrow window, humanity barely recognized yet. Movement returned gradually, but it was not hurried. Limbs stretched with a precision that seemed deliberate, controlled, almost disciplined. Jordan noticed it as he prepared the cabin each morning, adjusting blankets, checking the stove, filling water containers. Every action of Elian's recovery unfolded on its own schedule, measured and deliberate, as if the body itself understood order beyond human biology. The burn across the chest had begun to change overnight. The darkened tissue softened, swelling receded, and subtle signs of regeneration appeared, unlike anything Jordan had ever witnessed in animals, humans, or wilderness emergencies. It was neither miraculous nor chaotic. It was methodical. Healing occurred with an efficiency that seemed calculated, the body prioritizing function over display, survival over sensation. Elian did not demand attention. The small movements of rising, sitting, testing balance were deliberate exercises, not gestures of gratitude. There was restraint in every motion, a quiet demonstration that strength was returning, but only on terms dictated by the being itself. Jordan watched without interference, careful not to disrupt the rhythm. Observation had become reciprocal. Awareness of each other's habits, each other's boundaries, defined the space. The cabin felt altered. Objects that once belonged solely to the human routines now bore witness to a new logic. Steps, breaths, adjustments to firewood, all were measured against an unspoken pattern. Jordan realized that recovery was more than physical. It was a process of presence, of integrating an unfamiliar form into the rhythm of the cabin without displacing it. Each day brought subtle confirmation of something extraordinary. Skin darkened slightly in some areas, lighter in others, as if the body were mapping its own repair. Fingers flexed with new coordination. Eyes opened fully for longer stretches, registering surroundings with focus and intensity that suggested awareness had never waned, only rested. Jordan saw that the being's vulnerability was temporary, necessary only to establish context for the patience and discipline that followed. Time flowed differently. Days blended, measured not by sunlight or stove warmth, but by the incremental restoration of form and function. The winter outside pressed against walls, relentless, yet inside, something extraordinary was growing quietly, silently, almost imperceptibly. Jordan understood then that healing was not simply a return to life. It was a statement. Order, endurance, and careful control were woven into the body itself, demonstrating that recovery could be as much about will and discipline as it was about biology, and that patience and observation were instruments far older than any human method. Solitude was not emptiness. That thought arrived with a weight that Jordan could feel without sound or gesture. Elian's presence carried it quietly, pressing against awareness in a way that demanded reflection rather than reaction. The cabin, stripped of distraction and performance, had become more than shelter. It was a lens, It revealed the machinery of choice, of instinct, of pattern. Humanity, Elion conveyed, was easiest to measure where witnesses were absent. The grand gestures of society, the applause, the observation by peers, all of it created layers of performance. Actions taken for show or reward could never be trusted as indicators of true nature. Alone, without expectation, the human became transparent in ways that could not be achieved in crowds, committees, or cities. Jordan felt the truth of this in the quiet hours. Pouring water into a cup, stacking firewood, adjusting blankets, mundane, repetitive acts suddenly acquired significance. They were choices free from validation, actions reflecting instinct and habit rather than social pressure. Each movement, each small consideration, was recorded, noted, and weighed by a presence that required nothing more than consistency and attentiveness. Elion's observation emphasized endurance rather than spectacle. It was not a search for heroism or flaw, but for pattern. The small, daily consistencies revealed more than a public act of devotion ever could. Compassion, when extended without expectation of return, spoke louder than speech or ceremony. Patience under monotony demonstrated capacity for care. Integrity under silence exposed the true measure of intent. The being's eyes, large and unwavering, watched without impatience. Jordan understood that no single act defined him. It was the cumulative flow of behavior, repeated over days and weeks, that offered insight. Even mistakes were informative, showing limits, impulses, and choices when consequence was immediate and personal, rather than abstract or deferred. Outside, the storm slowed to intermittent flurries, but inside, the rhythm of observation continued. Silence, once Jordan's refuge, now contained accountability. Presence without intrusion demanded awareness. The cabin had become a microcosm, a distilled environment where decisions mattered more because they were unobserved by peers, yet observed by intelligence. The paradox pressed against consciousness. One was free to act, yet under scrutiny like never before. Jordan realized that solitude revealed not weakness, but truth. Without audience, humans displayed the architecture of their character. Small acts of kindness, hesitation, self-discipline, and even frustration became a map of intent. Elion did not intervene, but its attention made absence more potent than presence. Observation had a way of clarifying what the world often obscured, turning mundane patterns into revelations. As the day faded into the long winter night, Jordan understood that this was not merely a test of endurance or compassion. It was a mirror of the species itself, held quietly in a corner of a mountain cabin, where snow fell relentlessly outside. And inside, the simplest acts revealed the most profound truths. The winter was no longer measured by cold or hours, but by what could be seen in unguarded human choices, and by the slow, patient witness of something not of this world. The weight of time settled over the cabin as Jordan listened, not with ears, but with awareness that had learned to distinguish presence from intrusion. Elion had been watching far longer than the storm or the fall had suggested. The thought arrived unbidden, precise, layered with a quiet authority that made the hours outside the cabin feel like fragments of another life. Every routine, every small gesture, every unrecorded choice had been observed, cataloged, and understood. Habits that Jordan considered trivial were not trivial at all. The careful stacking of firewood each morning, the methodical clearing of snow from the threshold, the deliberate pace of water carried from the stream, all were recorded as signals of character. Even repetition, the mechanical rhythm of solitary life, revealed something deeper. Consistency, or its absence, became a language of truth that no words could convey. Reactions, too, had been noted. The flare of irritation when a branch fell in an inconvenient place, the restraint exercised when frustration threatened to take over, the calm applied when a task proved tedious. Elion had catalogued patience, endurance, and occasional anger alike, without judgment, without interference, simply noting how impulses were moderated or acted upon. Compassion, the quiet, instinctive response to suffering, had drawn attention particularly. The deer struggling in the snow, the bird unable to fly, the stranger lost in the forest months before each instance had been weighed against intention and consequence. Jordan felt a strange combination of vulnerability and clarity. Being seen for months without consent or knowledge could have been invasive, terrifying even. Yet there was no malice, no performance required. Observation had neither applause nor condemnation. It was measurement, patience, and patience extended across time. Every failure, every moment of exhaustion, every act of care that went unnoticed by others had contributed to a detailed understanding that could not be faked. The winter outside pressed its relentless rhythm against the cabin walls, snow piling silently, wind moaning faintly among distant pines. Inside, the air carried the echo of observation. Jordan recognized that the days he had assumed were anonymous were anything but. Every choice had been part of a larger pattern, a continuum of behavior under the quiet gaze of intelligence beyond his comprehension. The realization shifted his perception of solitude entirely. Isolation had been a stage for authenticity, a crucible where character could be revealed without disguise. Time itself seemed to stretch differently in the knowledge of long observation. Past months folded into a single frame of consequence and understanding. The slow rhythm of daily life, the preparation of food, the tending of the fire, the simple acts of care had become more than habit. They were evidence, proof of what could endure when no one was watching. Jordan sensed then that the winter was not merely a test of survival. It was a lens into the soul of the species, reflected quietly in a remote cabin, observed patiently, and recorded meticulously by eyes that had waited for months to witness the truth unfold. The realization settled slowly, like frost creeping across the windows of the cabin. Observation was not judgment. It was assessment, a patient, deliberate evaluation that extended far beyond the perception of any single human life. Jordan felt the weight of it not as accusation, but as clarity. Humanity had not been condemned, had not been measured against some rigid scale of morality. It was simply being recorded, cataloged, and weighed against potential, risk, and consequence. Every act of care, every instance of restraint, every choice made in isolation carried significance. The subtle decisions, the ones unseen by family, friends, or society, were the metrics that mattered. Jordan realized that the life he had considered private, the winter he had imagined as solitude, had been a window into something far larger. Observation did not aim to punish, it aimed to understand. Patterns, repetitions, reactions under stress, and the capacity for compassion were all evidence of the species' tendencies, both enduring and fleeting. Elion's presence conveyed this without haste. Each impression, each silent acknowledgement, reinforced that the being was neither arbiter nor prosecutor. The assessment stretched beyond individual moments into months, years, and generations. Actions in isolation revealed raw intent, stripped of pretense and performance. Consistency, resilience, and instinctive care were far more revealing than grand statements or public displays. Solitude had become a mirror, and through it, Jordan glimpsed both the fragility and the persistence of human choice. The cabin, once a place of refuge from others, now felt like a lens into truth. Snow fell relentlessly outside, a rhythm that measured time differently, stretching moments into observation. Each creak of the wood, each flicker of firelight, each quiet movement became amplified. Not by consequence, but by context. The acts of daily survival, carrying water, stacking firewood, tending the stove, were no longer mundane. They were evidence, small yet persistent, that even in isolation, Humans acted according to principles, often hidden from the world, but visible to those who watched patiently. Jordan understood that the evaluation was comprehensive. It encompassed thought, instinct, reaction, and the subtle calibration between desire and restraint. It accounted for acts of kindness without expectation, decisions made without audience, and moments of patience when fatigue or frustration might have dictated otherwise. Observation did not demand perfection. It demanded presence, attentiveness, and the quiet fidelity to actions that revealed character over time. The weight of this knowledge pressed gently, insistently. Humanity was not condemned, but neither was it free from consequence. The assessment was ongoing, patient, and relentless in its scope. Jordan realized that every choice, every instinctive act of care or neglect, contributed to a collective picture that might one day inform decisions with far-reaching implications. Winter, solitude, and the silent presence of Elion had revealed the profound truth that the measure of a species was not found in spectacle or rhetoric, but in the quiet accumulation of choices made when no one thought to observe. The assessment had begun, and Jordan understood that he and humanity were quietly, irrevocably part of it. The concept of choice, Jordan realized, extended far beyond himself. Elion conveyed it not as theory, but as a structured reality, a spectrum of potential outcomes for a species teetering between possibility and destruction. Observation was not arbitrary. It was informed by philosophy, strategy, and the recognition that every civilization carried consequences far beyond its borders. The three positions among observers were not simply opinions. They were operational frameworks, each with its own logic, weight, and implications. The first approach was absolute non-intervention. Observers who adhered to this philosophy believed that every species must experience its own trajectory, free from interference, including the right to fail catastrophically. Freedom, in this view, was sacred and untouchable. Even if a civilization teetered on the brink of self-destruction, interference would violate the fundamental principle of autonomy. Jordan sensed the harshness in this logic, yet beneath it lay consistency and clarity. Nothing was forced, nothing altered. Observation alone would bear witness, and only natural consequence would teach or destroy. The second approach was subtle guidance. Observers who followed this path accepted the potential for misstep, but believed that small, precise interventions could redirect civilization without violating autonomy. They did not act as rulers, but as facilitators, nudging possibilities, removing obstacles, inspiring decisions without dictating outcomes. Subtlety was essential. The measure of influence was invisibility, the art of altering trajectories without erasing free will. Jordan understood this as a delicate balance, a quiet stewardship designed to allow growth while avoiding collapse. It required foresight, patience, and profound restraint. The third approach was direct control. Observers who advocated this method concluded that a species had crossed thresholds beyond self-management, that continued autonomy posed unacceptable risk to itself or to larger systems. Action was necessary to prevent disaster, and this could include replacement of governance, limitation of technology, or other forms of structured intervention. It was not motivated by malice, but by calculation and the urgent recognition of vulnerability. Jordan felt the weight of its implications. Intervention at this scale was heavy, and yet, in its reasoning, it bore an almost clinical compassion, a recognition that unchecked potential could become lethal. Elion emphasized that none of these approaches was fixed. Each carried influence, but no absolute authority. Factions existed in tension, disagreement shaping observation as much as the observed. Trends shifted, weighted by evidence, consequence, and the subtle accumulation of data across decades. Jordan realized the enormity of what he had glimpsed. Humanity's future was neither predetermined nor guaranteed. It was the subject of patient deliberation, a spectrum of possibility, measured in silence, assessed through countless choices, and observed by eyes beyond comprehension. The winter, the cabin, and the small acts of care were not isolated events. They were threads in a larger tapestry of evaluation, part of a decision-making process that extended far beyond the reach of any individual life, far beyond the grasp of history itself. Time was no longer measured in days or weeks. The rhythm of snow falling, the crackle of the fire, and the quiet movements of the cabin had become markers of something far larger, something Jordan had only begun to grasp. Elion conveyed the concept with a precision that did not rely on words, yet carried weight heavier than any spoken explanation. Humanity was approaching a threshold, a point at which the potential for uncontrolled expansion would render containment impossible. Every moment now counted. Every decision, every pattern of behavior, was part of a record that might influence the trajectory of a species. The threshold was not abstract. It was tied to capability, the accumulation of knowledge, and the reach of technology. The moment humans developed the capacity to leave their solar system unchecked, to exploit resources without oversight, and to transmit influence across distances once unimaginable, the balance of observation and potential intervention would shift. Jordan realized that what had seemed distant and theoretical now pressed upon the present. Observation was not eternal patience. It was measured against urgency. Decisions had to be made before the window closed, before the threshold was crossed, before consequences became irreversible. Every action, every choice, even in solitude, contributed to the assessment. Jordan felt the weight of this reality, the quiet gravity that had made months of winter feel both intimate and vast. The small acts of care, the moments of patience, the instinctive restraint all mattered. They were fragments of data, signals of stability, hints of potential. The patterns humans revealed in isolation could weigh as heavily in deliberation as grand events broadcast to millions. Solitude, once Jordan's refuge, was now a crucible where the character of the species could be discerned in its rawest form. Elion's presence reinforced the urgency without alarm. The being did not dictate outcome, but conveyed consequences. The threshold was a line drawn by the inevitability of technology and expansion, by the impossibility of enforcing restraint once human reach extended too far. Decisions about intervention or non-intervention, subtle guidance or direct control, were informed by how individuals acted when no one watched, how civilizations maintained coherence under pressure, and whether the core capacity for compassion persisted under stress. Jordan reflected on the weight of months, the accumulation of silent observation, and the quiet intensity of Elion's eyes. The threshold was a boundary, but not yet a verdict. Time remained, fragile and limited, and the responsibility of choice, though not his own, was shaped by the patterns he had contributed. The cabin, the snow, and the winter had become more than survival. They had become a lens, a microcosm where the currents of humanity could be discerned, measured, and quietly evaluated. The realization was both humbling and unnerving. The future was close, and how the species acted now, individually and collectively, would determine whether the threshold became a point of awakening or of irrevocable consequence. Every moment mattered, every choice resonated, and Jordan understood that he had become part of a process far larger than any single life could contain. The question that had lingered unspoken in Jordan's mind finally found its weight in the quiet of the cabin. He had observed, tended, and considered for days, the unnameable presence beside him a mirror to his own reflections. And now, without words first, a thought formed in the space between them, carried directly into awareness with the clarity of undeniable certainty. Elion sensed it, acknowledged it, and the narrative shifted subtly, like a current beneath the surface of still water, moving from the present into layers of memory older than any winter Jordan had endured. The story unfolded not as a sequence of dates or events, but as impressions of vibration, intent, and consequence. Elian's presence had witnessed a figure whose name carried weight across centuries, whose actions had rippled far beyond the confines of any single life. Jordan felt the immensity of it without needing proof, the vibrations of an era captured in moments of choice, conviction, and resonance. These were not histories written in texts, nor interpretations filtered by human perspective. They were observations, recorded in consciousness itself, subtleties of emotion, influence, and resonance that eluded ordinary comprehension. Elian described a city alive with anticipation and fear, streets thrumming with the tension of countless souls unaware of their own role in the unfolding pattern. The figure moved among them, radiating presence without coercion, shaping attention not through spectacle, but through the profound gravity of example. Jordan could feel the subtle currents of reaction, hesitation, hope, and doubt that had flickered through the people around him. Nothing was contrived. Every choice, every gesture, every word uttered or withheld was observed, catalogued, and felt. The focus shifted to moments easily overlooked, yet critical to understanding the core of the events. Glances exchanged, gestures of care or avoidance, responses to suffering, and decisions made under duress revealed the essence of intent. Elian conveyed these with a precision that transcended narrative, imparting an understanding that truth was less about facts and more about resonance. Jordan sensed that he was learning not about history in the conventional sense, but about the architecture of influence, the mechanics of ethical and spiritual presence. Through the dim light of the cabin, he realized the continuity of observation. The same principles Elian used to assess humanity now were reflected in the witnessing of that ancient life. Compassion, consistency, authenticity under pressure. These were constants, markers that transcended time, connecting past, present, and the potential of future choice. The weight of understanding settled in Jordan's chest, profound and unnerving. He grasped that what he had always assumed about morality, impact, and consequence was only a fragment of a larger, timeless assessment. Winter outside pressed against the cabin with the familiar rhythm of relentless snow. Yet within, time and space expanded. Elian's recounting of that distant life was not idle storytelling. It was illumination, a revelation of the patterns that informed the present, the lessons that might guide or warn. Jordan felt the silent power of observation across centuries, the weight of choice carried forward by those who acted without expectation of notice, the echoes of intention that still shaped understanding. The story of Jesus, as seen through Elian's witness, was neither legend nor mere history. It was a living template, a measure of human potential observed without interference, a thread linking the past to the quiet scrutiny of the winter he endured now. The concept unfolded gradually, a subtle vibration in the quiet of the cabin that Jordan could feel more than understand. Elian's presence conveyed it not as theology or mythology, but as pattern and resonance, as an observation of consistency rare enough to draw attention across time and space. Jesus was not singled out because of some innate divinity or preordained status, but because the alignment of thought, emotion, and action he maintained was extraordinarily rare. His internal coherence, the harmony between intent and deed, radiated outward in a way that registered across observers, leaving subtle traces of influence even among those unaware of their own reactions. Jordan felt it not in concepts or argument, but in the spaces between moments, the micro-decisions that ripple through human behavior, actions performed without expectation of reward, choices made under duress that maintained integrity, and a consistency and compassion, regardless of audience. These were anomalies in the spectrum of human conduct. They were patterns that could be observed and recorded, their effects multiplying quietly through influence, inspiring and unsettling in equal measure. Elian communicated that it was this precision, this alignment of internal and external behavior, that marked him as noteworthy. The effect was neither immediate nor spectacular in conventional terms. Streets teemed with the ordinary chaos of daily life, yet the presence of one whose choices consistently reflected care and awareness created subtle shifts. People who observed without understanding reacted instinctively, drawn or repelled by a force they could not name. Small gestures carried weight beyond perception. Jordan understood that what appeared miraculous was not a product of power or spectacle, but the resonance of behavior sustained through attention and intention. It was the kind of alignment that few humans maintain, even momentarily, and rarer still, over the breadth of an entire life. Elion conveyed that observers did not merely witness. They cataloged patterns, measured constancy, and weighed impact. They were attuned not to the content of words alone, but to the integrity behind them, the alignment of feeling and action that produced ripple effects through communities, history, and consciousness itself. It was not an evaluation of belief, but of coherence. The sustained fidelity to principles that revealed latent potential. Jordan sensed that Jesus' actions had registered as exceptional, a behavioral anomaly in a species prone to inconsistency, contradiction, and self-interest. The cabin remained quiet as snow fell with relentless rhythm, yet the weight of this understanding pressed against Jordan's awareness. Alignment, integrity, and internal consistency were not abstract virtues. They were measurable markers of influence, indicators of a pattern so rare that it drew observation across centuries. Jordan felt the subtle hum of continuity, the threads linking this extraordinary human to the quiet scrutiny of Elion and the network of watchers whose patience spanned eras. The resonance of rare behavior, the subtle power of uncompromised alignment, explained why certain lives, like Jesus's, became focal points not by decree, but by observation, a record of human potential glimpsed in its purest and most enduring form. The implications of such rarity, Jordan realized, were as unsettling as they were illuminating, revealing both the fragility and the possibility inherent in every choice. The essence of communication, Elion conveyed, was often lost in translation. Messages intended for immediate perception, for personal alignment, became distorted when filtered through the structures of society. Jesus' teachings had not been designed to establish institutions, hierarchies, or enduring doctrines. They were meant to awaken something internal, to create resonance within individuals capable of perceiving the subtle alignment between intention, thought, and action. The lessons were tools for self-recognition, keys to the pattern of consciousness that allowed one to act coherently in the world, without coercion, without performative posturing. Jordan felt the weight of this subtlety. The resonance Elion described was not a philosophy to be memorized, nor a ritual to be repeated blindly. It was a calibration of attention, a tuning of perception to notice the imperceptible, the alignment between inner values and outer behavior. When such alignment was achieved, decisions were no longer reactive but coherent, extending compassion, understanding, and clarity without calculation. These were the acts that drew attention across time, registering not as doctrine but as measurable pattern. The observers, Elion explained, were attuned to the outcomes of internal coherence, not to the structures built around it. Institutions, codified rules, and formal worship were secondary, often obscuring the very essence the teachings sought to reveal. Humans had a tendency to externalize guidance, to create systems in an attempt to preserve or control the influence of rare behavior. Yet, structure could never replace the vibrational alignment of conscious action. It could imitate, it could enforce, but it could not replicate the subtle integrity that radiated from someone living in consistent resonance with their core principles. Jordan understood that this explained the persistent tension between legacy and intention. The lessons recorded, translated, and institutionalized over centuries had preserved fragments of the original alignment, but they had also created divergence, ritualized repetition, and performative acts that sometimes contradicted the original pattern. The power of Jesus' life, as observed, had always resided in the subtle, almost imperceptible choices made when no one else was watching. Those choices were the real vector of influence, the reason observers had taken note, the reason alignment became detectable across generations. Snow pressed against the cabin windows, a steady rhythm marking the passing of days. Within, the quiet between Elian and Jordan carried the weight of these revelations. Institutions could be built, dogmas could persist, yet the true impact lay elsewhere, in the inner movements of individuals, the choices made when observation was absent, the alignment of internal truth with external action. Jordan sensed the fragility of this reality, the tension between observable consistency and the human tendency to codify, to externalize, to control what was meant to remain fluid, internal, and alive. The story, as Elian conveyed it, was one of subtlety and precision, of intention that transcended structure, of messages designed for perception rather than preservation, for awakening rather than administration, for alignment rather than accumulation. The resonance of such a message, Jordan realized, was both timeless and uncontainable, capable of registering across centuries, yet never fully captured by system, language, or institution. The moment Elian conveyed was unremarkable by human standards, almost invisible when viewed through the casual lens of history. It was not a spectacle, not a confrontation, and certainly not the performance of power. It occurred in the hush of a crowded day, a quiet interaction unnoticed by the majority, yet it reverberated across the observers in a way few events had. Jordan felt the subtle weight of it, the intensity that arose not from action but from intention, the sheer coherence of inner truth meeting the unpredictable currents of human reaction. Elian described it as a simple act, an acknowledgement of another's suffering without expectation, a choice made entirely in alignment with internal integrity. No proclamation, no audience, no calculated effect, just a single human fully aligned with the pattern of compassion and discernment, choosing the correct course in the absence of recognition or reward. The observers, who had catalogued centuries of human behavior, noted this with tension because it was rare, unnervingly consistent, and entirely independent of circumstance. It revealed a truth they could measure but could not control. Jordan felt the paradox as Elian conveyed it. The moment was fragile, fleeting, yet it carried more information than battles, sermons, or miracles. It registered as a proof of potential, a template of what coherence looked like when fully embodied. Those who observed from the shadows, analyzing patterns of influence and deviation, were unsettled not by power, not by spectacle, but by the subtle, absolute fidelity to a principle that refused to bend under the pressure of expectation, tradition, or fear. It was pure alignment in action, a signal that resonated through time, challenging assumptions about influence, morality, and predictability. The observer's unease was compounded by the realization that such acts, invisible and uncelebrated, were the true carriers of impact. The tendency of humans to formalize, to ritualize, and to create monuments obscured the mechanics of influence that were already at work in these quiet alignments. The moment exemplified the subtle power of individual choice, a power that could ripple outward in ways no structural framework could contain. Jordan sensed that the significance lay not in what was done, but in the rare fidelity with which it was executed, the absolute coherence between intention and action. Outside, the storm had eased, but the snow continued, soft and unrelenting, a quiet rhythm echoing the persistent, unseen patterns that shaped the world. Within the cabin, the space between Jordan and Elian vibrated with understanding. Observation did not merely record events, it measured alignment, consistency, and resonance. The moment that had disturbed the observers was not a spectacle to human eyes, but it was a benchmark, a proof that human potential, when expressed without expectation, could exceed the predictive models of even the most patient witnesses. Jordan realized that the quiet, overlooked choices of a single life could unsettle centuries of observers, revealing both the fragility and the profundity inherent in alignment, intention, and the unseen power of coherence sustained across circumstance. The story of humanity, as Elian conveyed it, was a tapestry of choices and divergences, each thread a decision, each pattern a reflection of what could have been. Jordan listened as the implications settled around him like the unending snow, heavy but silent. Humans, collectively, had often favored security, ritual, and the comfort of authority over the uncertain path of inner transformation. The original alignment that had radiated from extraordinary lives like Jesus's was gradually refracted, distorted, and reframed. What was once a living resonance had become codified, formalized, and in some ways emptied of its essential power. Elian's observations were precise, almost surgical in their clarity. The observers noted the mechanisms of human behavior, how fear consistently outweighed instinctive care, how conformity could suppress alignment, how ritualized structures replaced subtle discernment. Jordan sensed that the frustration was not about failure or malice, but about potential unfulfilled. The capacity for alignment, for coherence between thought, feeling, and action, remained, but it was buried under layers of external expectation, social performance, and the compulsion for safety. Humanity had not abandoned the principles entirely, but it had chosen proxies, forms that mimicked fidelity without sustaining it. The message itself survived, though its living force had been diminished. Words were repeated, stories retold, doctrines preserved. Yet the resonance of the choices that gave them power had been lost in translation. The observers cataloged countless instances where fidelity had been supplanted by convenience, where care was performed but intention was absent, where ritual replaced insight. The persistence of alignment became statistical anomalies in a sea of pragmatic conformity. Jordan felt the subtle weight of inevitability in this pattern, the sense that potential was still measurable, yet often unreachable, without extraordinary awareness or discipline. Fear, Elian explained, was the most corrosive force in this dynamic. It replaced responsibility with compliance, curiosity with suspicion, and engagement with detachment. Humans sought to preserve themselves and their societies, often at the cost of the very resonance that could have elevated them. The observers documented, weighed, and recorded these deviations, recognizing them not as condemnation, but as data, evidence of tendencies that might, over centuries, tip the scales toward stagnation or collapse. Jordan understood that observation itself was impartial, yet the patterns it revealed were profoundly unsettling. Within the quiet cabin, the snow falling in relentless rhythm outside, Jordan felt the tension between what had been possible and what had been chosen. The lesson was neither theoretical nor abstract. It was embodied in the subtle erosion of alignment across generations. Humanity's collective choice to favor authority and ritual over inner transformation had left traces that observers could measure, moments that echoed across time like unspoken warnings. Elian's presence carried the weight of this truth silently, a reminder that even the survival of a message did not guarantee the survival of its essence, and that the observer's record was a reflection of what humanity allowed to flourish or wither in the hidden spaces of conscience, intention, and quiet action. Elian's words lingered in the cabin, heavy with implication and unspoken tension. Jordan felt the subtle vibration of history pressing against him, as though centuries of choices and omissions were condensed into the quiet air between them. The observers had debated endlessly, tracing patterns, weighing consequences, measuring alignment against potential. Yet one question refused resolution. Did humanity fail because it could not understand, or did it willfully divert from what had been asked, choosing ease over integrity, conformity over awakening, safety over resonance? The question itself was deceptively simple, yet infinitely complex. Humans had codified teachings, celebrated rituals, and maintained records of extraordinary lives, yet the essence of those teachings, coherence between thought, intention, and action, was elusive, fragile, often unrecognized by those it aimed to awaken. The observers noted every divergence, every choice that reflected the subtle corruption of alignment, and recorded the consequences. Jordan felt the weight of that assessment, the silent measurement of decisions that had never been witnessed by peers or audience, yet resonated through time, influencing trajectories invisible to those living them. Elion conveyed that the distinction mattered. Understanding without embodiment, comprehension without integration, was insufficient. Human intellect could translate words, dissect principles, and build structures, but it could not substitute for lived alignment. The observers' records showed countless moments where individuals had glimpsed coherence and then retreated into conformity, where inspiration flickered and was immediately extinguished by fear or self-preservation. Every act of avoidance, conscious or unconscious, was noted, catalogued, and weighed, forming patterns that would guide future deliberations. The debate among observers remained unresolved precisely because both possibilities, misunderstanding and conscious avoidance, were true in different measures across time and context. Some humans had genuinely struggled to perceive the internal pattern, their capacity constrained by circumstance, upbringing, or innate perception. Others, having glimpsed clarity, had turned away, substituting external structures, rituals, or authority to avoid the responsibility of internal transformation. Jordan realized that this duality created a tension that rippled through history, producing both hope and despair in the observers' assessments, a tension that could neither be reconciled nor ignored. Outside, the snow continued to fall with relentless persistence, a silent reminder of the continuity of observation, of the passage of unrecorded moments that shaped the trajectory of human potential. Jordan sensed that the question Elion presented was not just historical, it was active, pressing upon the present, reflecting patterns that might still be repeated, choices that still awaited alignment or deviation. The observers did not offer judgment, only measurement, and the ambiguity of human intention remained central to their debate. In the stillness of the cabin, Jordan understood that the question was both haunting and instructive. It revealed the delicate interplay between insight and action, between comprehension and accountability, and between potential and its realization. Humanity's fate, it seemed, rested not only on what was taught, but on what had been chosen, consciously or unconsciously. At the intersection of fear, curiosity, and the quiet, unobserved alignment of intention with action, the question remained, unresolved, pressing, and unavoidable. Had humanity misunderstood, or had it turned away from the truth that once stood clearly before them? The pattern revealed itself with a quiet inevitability, threading through the centuries like a river carving the same course over and over, shaped by the subtle currents of choice and circumstance. Jordan watched, or perhaps sensed, the echoes of history reflected in the present. The same impulses, the same hesitations, the same reluctance to confront internal truth. Elion's presence was a constant, silent guide, framing the observation, marking the cycles, recording the repetitions without judgment. Humanity had encountered the same question in countless forms, and yet the response remained familiar, almost predictable. Modern life, as Elion conveyed, presented all the trappings of progress: technology, infrastructure, communication, and visibility. Yet beneath the surface, the impulses of fear, comfort, and conformity continued to dominate. Societies had multiplied their complexity, yet the internal alignment that had once distinguished rare individuals like Jesus was still scarce, still fragile, still challenged by distraction and desire. Jordan began to see the parallels not as coincidence, but as evidence of a persistent human dynamic, a pattern that observers had catalogued meticulously, the repetition of choices that revealed the limits of awareness, the consequences of internal compromise. Elian's account suggested that the observer's patience was tested by these recurring cycles. Each generation offered glimpses of coherence, moments of integrity, and acts of compassion. Yet, in the collective, the tendencies toward self-preservation, ritualized authority, and performative virtue reasserted themselves, creating the same divergence between potential and realization. Jordan understood that this was not merely moral failure. It was a structural rhythm of humanity's consciousness, a pattern that could be measured, recorded, and predicted with disturbing precision. The observers were not indifferent. Their monitoring extended across centuries, capturing these recurrences, comparing each era, noting the frequency and intensity of alignment versus deviation. Jordan felt the weight of their impartial scrutiny, the sense that every choice, every unobserved act, contributed to the ongoing evaluation. Modern humanity, like its predecessors, displayed both hope and risk, insight and denial, courage and avoidance. The resemblance to past cycles was not comforting. It was a stark reminder that history's lessons had not been internalized, that the same decisions, the same compromises, repeated themselves quietly under the surface of apparent progress. Outside the cabin, the snow fell in relentless continuity, a mirror to the patterns unfolding beyond its walls. Jordan sensed that the observers were attuned to these rhythms, not to punish or reward, but to measure, to assess the alignment of a species against its potential. The realization was unsettling. Humanity's trajectory was not linear, not guaranteed, not safe. The same patterns that had shaped the responses to Jesus' life now manifested in the choices, distractions, and fears of the modern world. Jordan felt the chilling clarity of repetition, the quiet urgency of understanding that alignment, awareness, and coherent action were still rare, still fragile, and still decisive. The observers had watched before, they were watching now, and the cycles, unbroken and relentless, continued, waiting for humans to either recognize their pattern or be carried along by it once again. The departure was subtle, almost imperceptible, as though the air itself had shifted without announcing it. Jordan became aware not through sound or motion, but through the absence of presence, a void where the weight of observation had once settled. Elian had been a constant, a silent companion, a lens through which the unseen world and the patterns of humanity had been revealed, and now that lens receded without ceremony or farewell. The cabin felt emptier, yet paradoxically heavier, burdened by the implications of what had been shared and the questions that remained unspoken. There were no words of conclusion, no reassurance of outcomes, no predictions of survival or collapse. The observers did not intervene to provide comfort, nor did they offer judgment. Their role was to measure, to record, and to allow the unfolding of potential to reveal itself in the interplay of choice and circumstance. Jordan felt the weight of that impartiality more keenly than any presence, a quiet tension pressing against the rhythm of his own thoughts. Every action, every habit, every decision made in solitude had been witnessed, catalogued, and weighed. Yet the results remained unknown. The snow outside continued to fall in relentless cadence, the landscape unchanged by Elian's departure, yet deeply altered in Jordan's perception. Each flake seemed to carry the echo of observation, a subtle reminder that the patterns of humanity were ongoing, that assessment was continuous, and that the questions about alignment, integrity, and choice persisted beyond the cabin walls. Jordan realized that the presence of Elian had been a conduit, a bridge between observation and understanding, and that the bridge remained even as the observer's form dissolved into the quiet. Time stretched differently in the aftermath. The absence of Elian emphasized both the continuity and the silence of observation. The rhythms of the cabin, fire tending, meal preparation, careful maintenance of structure were imbued with a new layer of significance. Jordan moved through them not merely as routine but as acts of reflection, aware that each choice, however mundane, contributed to the larger fabric of assessment. The ordinary had become extraordinary, the unnoticed had become central, and the quiet had taken on a resonance that extended beyond the walls of timber and stone. There were no promises about humanity's future, no assurance that observation would result in intervention, nor that the cycles of alignment and deviation would shift. Jordan understood that observation itself was an ongoing process, impartial, unrelenting, and patient. The presence of Elion had made the invisible visible, the subtle patterns perceptible, and the unspoken questions unavoidable. In the stillness of the winter cabin, Jordan realized that departure was not abandonment, but an extension of observation. A reminder that the assessment of humanity was continuous, and that the choices of the present and the future were weighed quietly, unseen, and with consequences that extended far beyond the reach of any single life. The winter carried on, relentless and impartial, as it had always done, and in its silence, Jordan sensed both the vigilance of unseen eyes and the persistent call to awareness, understanding, and alignment. The observer was gone, but the record continued, as did the unbroken pattern of observation, waiting to witness what humanity would choose next. The cabin settled into a quiet rhythm that was both familiar and strangely altered. The fire burned steadily in the stove. The snow continued its ceaseless fall, and yet the presence that had defined the winter, the silent scrutiny, the patient observation, the intangible weight of knowing was gone. Jordan moved through the space differently now, with an awareness that lingered like a shadow across every action. Every gesture, every choice, every unspoken decision carried the imprint of the lessons learned, the insights absorbed, and the questions that had no final answers. It was not fear that remained, but a deep, resonant clarity. Humanity's fate, as Elion had conveyed, was neither fixed nor guaranteed. The patterns of compassion and indifference, courage and avoidance, integrity and convenience, all continued to play out quietly beneath the surface of daily life. Jordan understood that the observers did not intervene lightly, and the window of opportunity for alignment was both precious and fragile. The behaviors that went unnoticed, the moments that seemed inconsequential, were precisely the ones that revealed the deepest truths about choice and character. Every unobserved act mattered because it reflected the underlying structure of humanity itself. The lessons of the winter settled slowly into the corners of memory. Jordan recognized that the extraordinary events, the silent telepathy, the revelation of ancient truths, had transformed more than knowledge. They had reshaped perception. Solitude no longer meant isolation in the sense of detachment. It meant a heightened responsibility, an intimate dialogue with the self that mirrored the larger dialogue with the world. The presence of Elion had not been to guide or to dictate, but to reveal the unseen, to illuminate the currents of consequence that moved beneath action and inaction alike. Jordan began to see the continuity of observation not as judgment, but as a reflection of reality. Decisions, ethical impulses, the choice to act with compassion without expectation, the ability to maintain alignment under pressure. All these were measured not by spectacle or reward, but by consistency and depth. The silence of the cabin became a laboratory of awareness, a place where the weight of observation lingered in absence, where each decision was simultaneously mundane and profound. Humanity's trajectory was no longer abstract. It was immediate, tangible, and intimately tied to the private acts of integrity and care that passed unseen by others. Outside, the snow continued to fall in quiet repetition, a mirror to the cycles that persisted in the human heart. Jordan felt the resonance of unseen eyes, the continuing record of observation, and the unbroken chain of assessment stretching across time. Life had returned to ordinary rhythms, yet the ordinary itself was transformed. Every choice mattered. Every moment contained significance, and the legacy of observation remained as a silent compass. Humanity was neither condemned nor secure. The winter had passed, the observer had gone, but the vigilance of consequence endured. And Jordan understood, with a clarity that carried both weight and liberation, that what happened when no one was watching defined everything.